I think with photorealism, there's people that are extremely technically good out there. I think the ones that do it the best are ones that are bringing something additional to it, and that's where the art is.
I want to give the public, my audience and your audience, of course, the opportunity to get to know you a bit more, because I know you are like showing yourself a bit more nowadays, but still there is no much, or at least I think there is not enough from you. So,
Okay.
everything we can know. And yeah, I would like to, I don't know, I have some questions that are going to come naturally. But yeah, the idea is to have like this artist talk about who you are, what you do, why you do it, how you feel when you do it, your motivation, and all that we think it's very basic, but for the people on the other side of the phone, maybe they don't have any idea of what you think about all this. So I think I told you this. For me, I think this is very valuable, and since that's like for me, I think for the rest of the people it will be too. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it's a good platform to reach your audience and give them. It's an efficient way to give them information if they're willing to spend the time and to watch, to hear artists talk about their work, their journey, their motivations.
Yeah. A lot of times we artists fall in the trap of just talking about, like our stuff and like the piece, that drawing, that painting, and sometimes people want to hear who's behind, all those faces and the work, and to know that you're a human being, as you're showing to be finally with this post. So yeah, I think it will be appreciated.
Okay, so
who is AJ ALPER?
So I am a portrait artist. I work in Alla Prima, which is wet into wet oil painting. It's I like it because the process of the painting can be very evident in the finished work itself. There can be a duality between the brushstroke and the representation of form. I think when they do the two things very well, for me, it's very exciting. And it's a constant process of learning and building skills. There's never an end point where you say I've now mastered this. It's I think even some of the greatest artists have been known for this type of work, like John Singer Sargent, for example, that he was always learning. He was always pushing himself to kind of understand how to do what he was doing even better. I think he was probably one of his greatest critics, and pushing himself very hard throughout his whole career.
The Alla Prima, I know the Alla Prima technique. I know what you're talking about. Maybe there are people that don't, but it's like the idea is to sit in one session, start very, very loose, and end the painting. I mean, of course, you can sit for 2 sessions if you want, 3. There are no rules, right? But the idea, it's the Alla Prima is like on first, like the first try, and to leave it quite raw, right?
Right. So I think it can, if you look at the opposite, which is indirect painting, which can be a glazing technique, or to have dead painting, which is a gray painting underneath, and you build the colors on top of that, that this is a direct painting approach. You will have to think about value, color, form, how the brush stroke shapes, and the marks that you make all work together to create the finished painting. And when it's portraiture, obviously you want to be able to get likeness and skin texture where it's appropriate, and have the the movement of the wet paint work
Yeah.
to your advantage.
Yeah.
It's, and like I said, because you're working quickly and it's all wet, and it's not the idea that you come back days later and you make little refinements.
Yeah.
It's more you're making decisions as you're working. So it's something almost like jazz, more
Yeah.
improvisational, where you're making choices as you're working.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I mean, I have different feelings about this because someone could say or think it's easier because you just sit, paint, and that's it. But as you said, there are a lot of variables and things you have to take care of at the same time. And for you to be happy with that result, it's like a tough thing to do, you know.
Yeah.
So on a side, it's good for anxious people like me, for instance, that you sit, you paint, you're done. That's. But on the other side, if you're like a very perfectionist guy, that's tough for your mind, and you have to, you know, accept a lot of the marks that will be there. And it's not that you can, as you said, like, okay, I will go over this again and again and again. And so it's a very interesting approach. Yeah.
And I do know quite a bit of my audience is they want to see the brushwork.
Yeah.
They're very excited by it, and so a good reason why, one of the reasons why people will follow me is because they like that style of painting.
Yeah. Yeah, you have like this very battery brush stroke, if I may, which is very. I mean, I love it. I remember when I see your paintings, I think of Lucian Freud with the texture and the like the flesh. You know, it's very very interesting to see. So, how do you manage to get that texture? Because I do my oil paintings from time to time, and it's not the same, for instance, to paint, sorry, on a canvas than on a
Uh-huh.
board. So it
Right.
has something to do with that, or
So I used to paint only on canvas, and it's canvas tends to have a tooth or a texture to it that allows you to paint a little bit thicker. Um, it's when you start painting on board, the paint moves around much more easily. And if you're using the stiffer bristle brushes that you would use on canvas, you might run into technical problems where instead of laying down paint, you're actually picking up
mm,
a fair amount of paint with each brush stroke. And so when I first switched over, I had to experiment a little bit um, with gesso on the surface, how much gesso, whether I sand it or not, and then change to softer brushes so
mhm,
that I have the right balance where I'm laying down paint on top of other paint, and there is still mixture. You're mixing colors from what's on the surface from what's on the brush, and so um, like a stiffer brush, you would get too much mixture.
mhm,
With a softer brush, you can control how much, with the pressure, how much paint uh, is being mixed with each brush stroke. So part of the calculation is when you're painting and you're trying to lay down a color in an area that already has some paint in it, you have to make an approximation of what that color is going to be after the color on your brush mixes with the color that's
mm,
on the surface.
interesting. So you're doing it on boards, right?
On boards, yes.
Yeah.
So I use a branded board that has a little bit of a slick surface, and then I use the Speedball Mona Lisa boards, or I tend to.
Yeah.
And so I need to put a layer down of gesso to make sure that it has the right amount of tooth and absorption for how I paint. And then when I paint, I tend to have a thin mixture of oil paint. It's more, I like to say it's sort of like a milky or creamy consistency,
Yeah.
and I'll do most of my painting with that. But as I get towards the end of the painting, I start to increase the amount of uh, the thickness of the
Yeah.
paint. So I'll be some points moving to just pure paint without any thinner or oil medium to thin the paint. And it's usually in the lighter areas of the face or the subject matter
Yeah.
that I will come in and paint thicker. I tend to leave the shadows a little bit more, a little thinner or more transparent.
Uh-huh.
Almost all of my dark colors are transparent colors.
Okay.
I don't use anything like I don't use like any of the burnt and raw sienna or burnt and raw ochre. Because they're, I think for me they're too opaque, and then they tend to dry back kind of flat because they have a lot of dirt. I mean, it's basically dirt is the pigment,
Uh-huh.
and I prefer using a range of colors that are transparent in the darker areas of the painting. So
That's interesting.
if you look at my palette, it's all the transparent colors. Basically, they're all very dark colors.
Uh-huh. And talking about your palette, I wanted to ask you, do you prepare always the same palette? Like, doesn't matter the subject, or do you, how you say, like, customize your palette
So
to the piece?
So I'm using the same palette all the time. It will vary slightly over time. I'll pick up a new color and try it and replace an older color. So I used to use ivory black for my black, and that's a semi-transparent color. And now I use a chromatic black. It's a Gamblin artist color on their range of colors. And chromatic black is a mixture of quinacridone red and a phthalo emerald is the color.
Uh-huh.
So when you mix those two colors together, they're perfect complements, and they're completely transparent. So they create a balanced transparent black. And that's a very nice color to work with, especially mixing with other transparent colors for shadow colors. And so if you want a lot of color in the shadows, you would use less of the chromatic black. If you wanted it more neutral, then you could use pure or slightly mixed chromatic black.
That's good. That's good. Lot of information right there.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions about my palette from a recent post. So if you go to my page now, the last post is my palette and all the colors,
Uh-huh.
if anyone was curious to see that.
Yeah, I think I saw that one today. Yeah, this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. So did you, I think you went to art school, right?
Yeah, so I went to Art Center College of Design.
Center, yeah.
That's in Pasadena, California.
Yeah.
And it's a great school for learning a very wide range of mediums to work in. I went as an illustration major and didn't go through their fine arts program, which was more of a conceptual program. So it was very, very light on the technical side. So, but illustration was much more technical. They had you do everything from charcoal, pastel, airbrush, watercolor, acrylics, oil paint. You did some silk screening, so you learned how to cast, make mold making. There was a lot that you did. So I know some of the academies now, they're very focused. They have you do Grisald drawing, and you do cast drawings, and you do that months and months, and then you get to eventually you get into the full oil painting. Everything is done site size, so it's sort of a very disciplined kind of environment, where Art Center it was much more open in terms of medium, but it did have a very large focus on painting and drawing from life, and also continually bringing up your skills, practicing. And there was a very high focus on gestural drawing, which were working from a model, doing 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute, 10-minute poses before you get into long poses. And so the idea really was, when you see a lot of more academic drawing, there tends to be kind of a stiffness to it.
Yeah.
And I think that just the amount of gestural drawing that the students do there, that I did there, tends to lend itself to try to not have the subject matter be so stiff.
Yeah.
You've kind of learned little tricks and understanding how slight bends and turns and direction of the pose make a big difference, and just bringing that gesture into the kind of marks that you're making and the decisions you're making about the pose.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a mixture, right? Like between the
Yeah.
academic stiff figure and like the 7.5 heads and all that, with that, as you said, like the gesture and the movement of the
Right.
figure. So do you think it was a good decision to go to art school? Would you recommend to do it? Not?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, and some of my followers ask me that sometimes. Should I go to art school? And some of them are actually in developing countries asking whether they should come to the United States and go to
Yeah.
art school.
Yeah.
And I just think about
That's
the
tough.
monetary
Yeah.
investment in doing that. And I think, and also the what some art schools are now offering don't always meet what the students are looking for. So you could spend $60,000 a year and not get the kind of education that you're looking for, and then come out and not have clientele, not have a market for your work when you come out of school. So I have a hard time recommending that
Yeah.
to people, unless you're either can get somehow nearly a full scholarship, or you have financial means that your family has money. But I think with social media, with YouTube, with all of the resources online now, I mean, it used to be there you could find some books like the Loomis books, for
Yeah.
example, that you could teach yourself, but now there's just so much information online. There's also specialized ateliers that you can pay for. They're much more focused. They're not as expensive as going to an accredited art university. So there's many approaches here. So I would have a hard time recommending just
Yeah.
like, okay, go to an art school.
Yeah, of course. I know there's no easy answer. Every situation is different. But as you said, like, yeah, there is plenty. I think all the information it's there for free, but
Yeah.
I think you have to be um, you have to be able to organize yourself, and you have to, because there
Yeah, so
is.
it requires discipline for
Yeah,
sure. And when you
exactly.
go to an art school and you're being graded and your teacher expects you to show up in class and you're supposed to turn in work on a certain
Yeah.
day, obviously the structure of the school forces you to be
Yeah.
disciplined, where you're paying a lot of money and you're going to get failing grades and you're going to be out of the school if you don't do the work. So there's a lot of exterior pressure that forces you to be disciplined.
Yeah.
As someone who's learning by themselves, you have to bring that discipline
Exactly.
yourself,
Yeah.
and not everyone has that.
That's
Um,
that's
and
a
so
yeah.
the ones that succeed are the ones that do have that ability, that self-discipline. And it's part of the reason why I put the portrait challenge on my host that through my Instagram page, is that it gives a framework for people to produce a portrait every day for 100 days. And that act of doing that, to have a framework for doing that, has helped a lot of people that didn't really, either they didn't understand the value of showing up every day to do the work, or they didn't have that natural part of that self-discipline to do it. This gets them kind of on the way to
Yeah.
doing that. And in 100 days, you can really see a lot of improvement in your work. So it's a validation in a way that investment in yourself as an artist doing the work is something that is worthwhile to continue doing it.
So the challenge is to do 100 faces, portraits,
100
in
portraits.
100
In
days.
100 days. So it's a portrait a day for 100 days. It's called the 100-day portrait challenge. If you put in that hashtag, or if you DM me, I can give you information on how to participate in the challenge. It's completely free. There's rules, but there's no punishment for missing a day or some days or taking a break. As an incentive, when someone completes the challenge, I post their work to my page, their favorite painting or portrait of the challenge, their first and last portraits, and I usually pick out one, my favorite, to put as the cover image in the post. And so it's a great way of getting a little bit more exposure too, and to get recognized for the hard work.
And we were talking about discipline. So what are your recommendations in order to be able to accomplish this challenge? Because I told you the other day we spoke, and I told you I did this 30-day challenge, and it was so hard to do it. So when you talk about
Right.
100 days, I'm like,
Yeah.
give me the secret, the instructions, how,
Right.
like,
Well,
you recommend to say, like, okay, every night take an hour, 2 hours every morning. Like, do you think it's okay to fix an hour time in the day? Like, how to go for it?
so I think you do have to decide on a working method and approach that you can finish a portrait in the amount of spare time that you have. I mean, I think that people underestimate the amount of time they have in a day
Yeah.
to do these things, yet they'll waste hours and hours every day doing things, entertainment or um, just sitting around and talking to friends. And if this is something they want to do, they have to carve out the time to do it. I know you're quite busy. You're doing your courses, you're doing your artwork, you're managing a lot, and then so to do a challenge on top of that, you're unless that's the artwork that you're doing and you can pare down your courses, that can be quite a challenge. But I do think that most people have the time in the day to do this. Now you've seen the amount of work that I have on my page, and I do now. Recently, I've been doing commissions, and I can't post a lot of that work just because of the client privacy. But that work comes out of 3 or 4 years of making decision to continually work on my art. And it may not have been every day, but it would be several times in the week, painting on the weekends also. And this is with a full-time job. I have a full-time job. So that's not art. It's not painting. I do web development, front-end web development. And so that's at least 9 to 5 every day that I'm doing work. And I also have a family. I make dinner. I do all the things that that life throws at you. But I would set aside time every day. Usually it's starting at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and painting until midnight, sometimes later. And then on the weekends doing the same thing, dedicate a big chunk of the weekend to painting. And initially it was just for myself and for my audience, but now more it's commissions. So and as I take commissions, I'm committing myself to doing that work. So there is a little bit of structure that's thrown in that forces me to be disciplined about it.
Yeah, so here I'm going to throw like a tip, I think, or something at least helps me a lot with with sitting and drawing or painting. And I discovered this very late, I mean, on my career. But I used to say, okay, now I have 2 hours to draw, I have 1 hour to draw. I used to sit at my desk with my paper, everything. And I used to, start thinking, what am I going to draw today? And start looking for reference and start, on the web, on Instagram, on everywhere, Pinterest. And I spent half an hour maybe just looking for something I wanted to draw or paint. So now what I'm doing, and I discovered and helps me so much, is I have one folder with like 1,000 images I really want to draw, like maybe figure drawing, portraits, whatever. You can have, of course, like another folder inside the folder with the faces, with the perspectives, with the whatever you want. But that way, when you have, for instance, an hour to draw, you sit there, open the folder, grab a picture, and start drawing. You don't have to spend half an hour, 45 minutes looking for reference. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting point, because I had struggled with this for a long time
Mm.
about the question of what am I painting? Who am I as an artist,
Yeah.
and what I should be painting? Just give me a second. I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to
sure.
let the cat out. Come on, Pasha, going out. No, just wants attention. Okay,
Yeah.
I will. Um, come here, come on, come on, come here. Yeah, yeah, cat.
Nice. Yeah.
So and I had told you when we talked at some point that I had stopped painting for 7 years,
Yeah.
and part of that was I was doing primarily plein air landscape painting, and didn't find that what I was doing, I didn't feel passionate enough about it, and realized that I was doing it mostly because I thought it was a path to becoming a professional painter, to getting selling more work, because landscapes can be very accessible. You don't have to explain to someone coming into your house, oh yeah, it's what landscape is that specifically? Whereas if you put a portrait up of somebody that you don't know, then the question is, well, who is that
Yeah.
person? And then you're like, well, I just like the painter.
Yeah.
And so there is that tension there. And so people don't tend to buy as much portrait painting. And so I always had in my mind, like, if you want to be a figurative painter, that you have to find a genre of painting that you fit into, that you can make your work about something, so that you have the ability to paint portraits or figures, and there is that still an accessibility, because someone buying your work is oh, I like the scene, I like the story, I like it's a Western motif, or this is a period painting of of a country setting where someone is taking in water from the well or something like that. There's a story behind it. It's not just like, well, who is that picture person in that painting? And it was difficult for me because I just wanted to paint people. I
Yeah.
just wanted to paint. I wasn't really concerned about um, I didn't wasn't that interested in any specific genre, and it took me a long time to give myself permission just to paint faces, just to do head studies. Didn't have to be a finished gallery quality painting that took weeks or 2 weeks to do. It could just be a sketch or a study. And you'd be surprised, is like you get these voices in your head that tell you, if you're going to be an artist, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And at some point I just realized, no, it's just me and the work. It's the work that I want to do. It doesn't matter what it's for. If I am enjoying it, that's important. So when I got to that point, someone had recommended an app called Sketchy. You're
Yeah.
familiar with it. And people upload selfies, headshots, and any artist can go in there and find a photo that they want to draw or paint, and they do a painting of it and they repost it back to the app. But what it has in there, it has a, a huge database of people's photos that you can choose from. Now you can get lost in spending a lot of time with those photos. Sometimes I would spend hours going through photos to pick out ones, but eventually you get to a point where you have a folder of of photos that you've picked out to choose from. And so when it came time to paint, I would have already chosen ones that I want to paint. And there was something really liberating and just in a couple ways that I just had photos of people that weren't any particular genre. It wasn't trying to be anything. It was just the ability for me to take a photograph of a person and do a painting from it. The other thing is that before these kind of social media tools where you had tons of selfies of people, um, if you wanted to do paintings, portraits, you would have to do all your own photography. You would have to find somebody that you thought was interesting and ask them permission to take a photograph. There was always this kind of tension that, like,
Mm.
who is this guy? He wants to take these um, very intimate photos of me. And with people posting, and kind of every person now has a camera on their phone and they take it everywhere they go, and they take tons and tons of photos of themselves, all of a sudden you have these um, very expressive and intimate pictures of people that
Yeah.
you wouldn't have otherwise. And that's a key part of my work, because if you look at my paintings, they are kind of, they have a bit of emotional or expressive um, content to them. Sorry for the cat.
Yeah. No.
He
No.
just
No.
really wants attention right now.
Of course.
And and there is also this intimacy. The naturally, a phone, if someone's taking a selfie, the picture is going to be from 3-4 feet away, and that distortion or the perspective when you're taking a picture that close implies, if you carry that over into the painting, implies an intimate distance from the subject, that it may not be obvious at first, but it feels close.
That's interesting.
And it's different than traditional portraiture and different in portrait photography, in that the tendency would be to get further away and use a longer distance
Yeah.
lens so that you're taking out all the distortion.
Yeah.
And what happens is that creates a sense of distance in the portrait. And because I was working from these selfies, there was naturally this sense of intimacy. Either sometimes it's even someone laying on their bed taking a picture from above.
Yeah.
And that is, for me, that's kind of ultimate intimacy. You're in their bedroom,
Yeah.
you're with them, they're laying on their bed. And you may not get it immediately when you look at the portrait, but you feel something about it. And so I like that aspect of my work, that it is, in a way, it is kind of a voyeur in a sense, but those people are also giving you permission to
Yeah.
work from those photos. And so it is an entry into a world because of these new medias that I wouldn't have normally.
So I love I never thought about it this way. I'm amazed by what you're telling me. I think it's really amazing. I've never thought about it. But what I'm thinking right now is I love the combination of something very traditional and very old from the old masters, because oil and the portrait, with the combination of that with nowadays the selfie, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a
Mhm.
combination and a mix between something very old and traditional and the 2020, right? The selfie, which is
Right. And
that's
and I
very that's interesting.
and I think the Alla Prima method, in a way, because of its looseness, and it
Yeah.
tends to be a more expressive way of painting, and I talked about gesture before, that combined with that sort of expression and intimacy of the photos really is an interest. It can be a powerful combination
Yeah.
that people see immediately. Like, there's something special about that painting that I can't. It's like it's different from the photo. It has something more. A lot of people will say, "Well, the painting is better than the photo," and it's not. I'm copying the photo, but just the kind of the combination of things that
Yeah.
I have to interpret the photo. I can't be painting every pixel by pixel and making exact replica. I'm reinterpreting it in the way I paint and
Yeah.
trying to make a faithful reproduction of it, but it's always going to be different than the photo.
Yeah. You are adding your own value to that
Yeah.
photo. You're adding
And
part of your personality to it.
and also another thing that I'm doing is I don't, because I'm not doing a preliminary drawing. I'm working directly with the paint right from the beginning. I'm taking some measurements and then working like that. That there is, it's not going to be uh, exactly the proportions and the likeness can be there, but it's not exactly the same. And so it starts to look like more a painting by me than it does look like a copy of a photo.
Yeah, I think mostly when you start the path, I mean, of art, and when you start drawing and you're a beginner, that we all want to get the exact same look, the exact same details, the exact same, like we think the drawing or the painting is not okay if it doesn't look the exact same way. But I think this you're saying, like, when you have the realization that uh, it doesn't have to look the same, it has to look, you have to share how you see that picture, like your own reality. I think that's a before and after in an artist career or way of
Sure.
working, and to be able to like the way you do things, and to be able to like the way your eyes distort reality.
Mhm. Well, there's something that I think about is that there is this tendency, sort of a validation of an artist is that you can recreate a
Mm,
photo. There's a sort of there's the uh, interest in a lot of artists in photorealism as a validation of your ability as an artist. And I think with photorealism, there's people that are extremely technically good out there. I think the ones that do it the best are ones that are bringing something additional to
mm,
to it, and that's where the art is. Not because everyone can, not everyone, but it takes a certain amount of discipline to learn how to do photorealism. um, a lot of it requires a certain amount of tracing or gridding to get the exact measurements, and there's a part of it that starts to be a little bit like, I don't want to demean it, but it is like coloring by numbers in a way, because you're setting out small areas to paint within and then matching colors and putting it in, and to get the kind of effect. And it's very difficult to do. So I don't want it to sound like that I'm putting it down. Um, and I admire a lot of photorealists, but I admire the ones the most that are bringing more to it. There's a conceptual idea behind it. With the way I'm painting, it's important to realize that people generally don't see the photo reference that you painted
mm.
from when they see the painting. It has to work as a painting on its own. Um, when you look at my work, maybe you can tell that it's done from a photo. I tend to like to think that if I painted from life or painted from the photo, I would paint the same way, because I'm looking at the photo on my computer screen and I'm, as if there was a sitter there, I'm painting it.
Yeah.
And now obviously it's more stationary than a live sitter. So when you're working with a live sitter, you have to arrange the lighting and you have to give them breaks, and they're going to move slightly throughout the pose. So there's all that aspect, but I'm working sight size and as if there was a live person in the room with me. But what I was going to say is, when I post for educational purposes, I put a lot of times the photo with the painting so people can see
Mm,
how the choices that I've made in relationship to the reference, because most of my followers are artists that are learning. So I put that in there. But if you have a painting on a wall, no one's going to know the photo looked like. You can make all kinds of choices, and it's going to say, well, oh, well, it doesn't look like the photo. So I think artists have to give themselves more permission
Yeah.
to move away from the resource, from the reference,
Yeah.
and make decisions based on what they like aesthetically and conceptually. Um, and so then you get away from this idea is like your level of art is based on your ability to replicate something else.
Yeah, yeah. I try to tell my students, because a lot of times they look at their drawing and at the picture, and they tell to me, like, they say, yeah, but the eye doesn't look exactly the same. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, the photo is always going to win that fight, of
Yeah,
course. But what I try to say is, like, try to add something else, because for me that's the interesting part, not to be a prisoner of that reference picture, like to be able to add, to make a decision on what you're seeing, and to make a drawing, not a copy of a picture, not a
sure.
faithful representation, like the exact same thing. And I think it's at the beginning, people, I mean, they are like, they draw, and well, they have to say, okay, well, this is what I could do. But when they go a bit further and they advance a little bit more, there is a moment when they start taking conscious decisions with that piece, and they start thinking about the drawing they are doing, and not to copying the exact photo. So I think um, that's again a big moment, and a big thing to do, to be able to uh, there's one moment when you have to say, okay, so that's a picture, okay, I get it. So but what do I want to draw or paint? Do I want to
Uh-huh.
change the color of the background? Do I want to change the hat? Do I want to change a little bit of the temperature of the face? Do I want What do I want to say with the painting? You
Sure.
don't have to be, completely dependent of the what you have in the reference, right?
Yeah. So I had this one teacher at school. Actually, I never had a class with him, but I admired his work enough that I took workshops with him.
Uh-huh.
And he had a model set up, and I was doing a pastel of it. And he said, "That's wonderfully technical job that you've done. It looks like what you're seeing, but how does it work as a painting?"
Hmm.
So he was sort of challenged me in this way, is like, what is it that, the model isn't going to be there when someone looks at it. They just are there to enjoy the painting. So are you giving them something that of value, of interest to look at? And so that was a interesting question for me, because it had forced me to rethink
Yeah.
my approach. Also, one thing I just wanted to add to all of this is that I talked about how I paint from photos and I'm working from a computer monitor. Um, in um, in the posts that I do, and interacting with the audience, I find that people make all kinds of judgments about what's valid and what's not in terms of art. And some people would say, well, because I'm working from photographs, that's not valid, that you need to be working from life.
Oh.
There's other artists that are working digitally, and people will say, well, that doesn't count because
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not making a physical painting.
Yeah.
Some would say, oh, well, you could just be retouching a photo. Well, I know a lot of digital painters, the amount of time and hours that they spend making a digital painting is beyond anything that most artists do painting with physical media.
Yeah.
And I look at it and I say, well, that's art, because I can see I get something from it when I look at it that's not the same as looking at a photo.
Yeah.
Um, it is the artist has brought themselves to bear in in the digital painting they've done, and it's completely valid. So I think that we kind of have to get away from the judgment a little
Yeah.
bit of what is art and what is not. And especially anyone listening to this, however you want to work, whatever is natural to you, whatever gives you pleasure, whatever your passion is, that's valid.
Yeah.
That's coming from you. Don't let other people dictate what what is what is basically something that you're doing for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, time has changed. I mean, uh, in the old days, they didn't use a monitor because they didn't have a monitor, you know?
Right.
And I always say, like, when I hear again the same thing, like digital, that's not art, or like, do you think that Miguel Angel or Da Vinci, they wouldn't be trying new things these days? Like, of course, they
Of
would do,
course they would.
of course. Like,
Right.
I think there are no rules. The one that I mean, you put your own limit, you know.
Uh,
And
I have people tell me, oh, you shouldn't use black in your palette, or you, um, or you're working from distorted photos, and that's wrong.
I
You
don't
have
think.
to correct that. And I'm just like, no, it's like you do you.
Yeah,
I'll do me.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's not wrong or right. I mean, obviously people that don't have certain skills, so you can see it in their work, and they could improve that work, but it's not wrong or right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you know what? I did the interview with Martin Campos. I don't know if you know him.
Yes,
The other day,
you've shown me
yeah,
his work.
I'll be sharing his work. The interview actually tomorrow, and yeah, he said something, and I will say here that it's like, if someone is judging you, if you're making someone mad, you're doing something right. You know, so that's a
Well,
good sign.
yeah, well, I don't think my work is very controversial, but there
Well,
are people that when I'm giving my portrait tips and say, you know, like, make these lines parallel, and I get someone on and say, well, you're not telling people that they're in perspective and should be converging to a vanishing point. It's just like, and you're teaching them wrong, and you're doing them a disservice. And I'm just like, no, this is where it starts. They have to understand the basic first before they go into the perspective. But
yeah,
if they don't understand that certain things have alignments, then they have no basis to work from.
yeah,
And so I think there was another one recently. Oh gosh, what was it? Um, I don't know if it was the proportion of thirds from
yeah,
the Loomis drawings or something else. Someone got on and said, that's completely wrong. Oh, I had someone. So I did a post about having one eye distance between
yeah. Both
eyes.
eyes. Yeah,
So, then this is a rough rule, but this
yeah,
gives someone a starting point, and everyone's going to be a little different.
yeah,
So I had someone do a post sort of implying that this was a colonialist view of art in proportion, and that I'm somehow my post was racist
yeah,
because I was saying
yeah,
that I was using something that I guess only Caucasian people have. I don't know.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, it's not true, but it's just like, this is the time we live in.
yeah,
That
yeah. It's crazy.
you can't even tell people a basic thing to help
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
and
You're
like,
trying to help, showing a
so,
little bit, like giving a hand, and I don't
yeah,
know.
so this is the downside of social media, that
Yeah,
people feel the liberty to go on there, and they're not adding true value themselves, and they feel, I guess, angry that someone else is getting attention, or they're saying things that don't match what their beliefs are, and they get in and they want to leave a bunch of negative posts.
I
And so I've learned now just to, either either restrict the person's comments, or block them, or erase the post, or just say something kind of humorous back, and just
yeah,
let it
yeah,
go,
yeah, yeah,
or not pay any attention at all to it.
yeah. Uh, yeah, that happens. That happens. But I don't know. There will always be, haters and people talking shit about what we do. I mean, that's part
Right.
of the job. But it's weird because when I see, and I see a lot of drawings or paintings I really don't like, but I just say nothing, you
Mhm.
know, like
Yeah.
I just
It's not
don't.
your cup of tea, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I won't write a bad comment or a bad review. Like I would say, okay, if I think that's not good, I will leave that comment for myself. You know,
Yeah.
I like,
Right.
I don't
So
know.
there was, I think this was a while back. There was one artist I saw. His drawings were very good, but he was working in pencil, and the way they're photographed, he's picking up some value from the paper, so it's already like not white when they're photographed.
Okay.
And then he's how you know how graphite will not get very dark
Oh yeah,
depending
yeah,
on,
yeah,
so he's photographing them, not adjusting the values. So if you look at his page, it was all these very kind of light drawings that you could barely see. And I left him a post, or maybe I DM'd him showing him the adjusted values so you could actually see the drawing,
yeah,
because it's not in person. And he didn't like that at all. He thought like part of the beauty of pencil drawing is the shade of it, and that he didn't want to darken the work at all, and it wasn't representative of what the work actually looked like. Fine, but the audience really couldn't see the the drawing, but this was how he wanted it to be, which is fine.
yeah,
Um, but I just learned, like, unless someone really asked you,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
then like don't give a criticism or
yeah,
don't leave an opinion, because it's not. If they ask you like, oh, I don't know what to do here, why isn't it working, then fine, jump in and
yeah,
say, like, give a suggestion, try to be constructive, obviously, don't tell someone, oh, that sucks, dude.
yeah.
um,
So
just
I wanted to ask you now, like you're sharing a lot of like very brief tips on Instagram, like you said, like between both eyes we have the size of an eye or the rule of thirds in the face, like,
yes.
and you're promoting a custom, like a personal coaching for artists.
So I just started doing this recently. It came out of, I saw one artist, a young woman um, who asked me a question in the DM, something about either growing her audience or selling work or something to that nature. And I started answering her question, and I in a way developed more of kind of a mentorship with her, helping her as she's trying different things and giving her suggestions, artists to look at, etc. um, I kind of feel like the subject matter of her work, I'm not that kind of coach to dive into, like, you should try painting this way or that way. I think that gets into a very sensitive area. But in terms of improving your work and growing your audience and improving your marketing and your personal brand, that's something that I feel like I have some expertise at, having done it for myself and trying so many different things over the years. I can say that I know a lot about what doesn't work,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah,
through all my failures.
yeah, yeah,
And I do know a bit about what does work, having had growing success at doing it. And with the mentoring her, I realized, like, this is something that I could at least do, charge for other artists. That So this idea of doing coaching calls and helping someone through like Instagram DMs is something that seemed like a natural extension of what I was doing already. I was already helping tons of artists who would ask me questions either in comments or in the DMs, and um, realized that, like, there's value there, that I, besides just my painting and besides giving away a lot of information as for tips and helping people with the challenge, that I could also develop an art coaching consultation, art coaching business. And so that just started 2-3 weeks ago in the beginning of September. And so know the exact count between people who've actually have paid for initial session and have started, and those people have just asked me and intended to, but it's about 10 people so far in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I've always treated my Instagram audience like these aren't the audience generally for my paintings, for my commissions. I sell those primarily through Etsy, and I will get some through Instagram. But my audience tends to be younger artists that want to learn.
Yeah.
And some part of that audience are artists that are trying to figure out how to. They're either professional artists that are selling through galleries and promoting their work in other ways and haven't figured out social media, or ones that are just really starting out and don't really have access to gallery system, especially nowadays that galleries aren't really a great option if people are not vacationing, they're not going into establishments, there's not the kind of foot traffic. Then social media is the best place to build your personal brand, and some of the online marketplaces are the best place to sell your work.
Yeah, I agree. So, but I mean, you're all over social media, right? You're on TikTok, you're on Sketchy, you're on Pinterest, you're on Instagram. Like, how do you manage like to be everywhere? It's just you, right?
So I'm not everywhere. Like I have a Twitter account, but I don't do much on it. LinkedIn also. Listening to Gary Vee, like LinkedIn is the place to be. TikTok and LinkedIn. And I just decided, I've written some articles for LinkedIn, and I just feel like that's not, that requires a different kind of content than I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be more business oriented. Yeah. And it's also very time consuming to grow the audience there. So I have to kind of pick where I am. I have a YouTube subscribers. I have over 4,000. But I can't spend a lot of time there because of the time required to make video content. It's just too great. You have some experience with that, the editing time, the production time. It's very time consuming. So you could just be a YouTube content creator, and that could be your whole job essentially, outside of doing artwork or anything else.
Yeah.
And so, I like Instagram because I can produce content fairly quickly. I know I do spend sometimes several hours on a post where I use all 2,200 characters, and I put several images in the carousel, including sometimes time-lapse videos or video. But overall, it's like I did a painting, I can take a photo of it, I can take some close-up shots, I can post it, I can write quickly and tag the person that's the subject of it. I can put the photo of the person in there, and that's a post, and so that doesn't take very long, but it does require time, because if you're going to do it consistently, you have to dedicate the time to do that. And I've dove in recently to TikTok and tried it out and put in time-lapse. I found every time-lapse video that I had and uploaded it to that, shortened it to 1 minute or 15 seconds, and put music to it. And then once posted to TikTok, then I'm repurposing it, reposting it in stories or in my post on Instagram. So repurposing that. I've taken my tips that I've made over last year and reposting those now because I've grown my audience. A lot of my audience hasn't seen those before. So, and I was doing a weekly live demo every Tuesday night on YouTube. And then I would put an announcement on Instagram saying, come over and watch on YouTube. And it's amazing how few people actually go over. Oh. They want to see a live demo, but they don't want to leave Instagram.
Yeah.
They have to open up another browser window.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how few, when you realize the friction between moving an audience from one platform to another is so huge. you don't think it would be, but it is.
Yeah.
So even if I do announcements and I'm talking to an audience that's 50,000, 100,000 people, I might get 30, 40 people
Yeah.
to come over and to watch. And some point I did have to be somewhat selective about how much time I spend on which platforms and
Yeah.
which is going to be most effective for me. So I'm not producing as much content for TikTok at this point, and more for Instagram. Um, I did get a lot of requests for interest in commissions on TikTok, but none
Uh-huh.
of those had led to any sales, converting to sales. So and at first it seemed like, wow, there's a lot more interest in commissions here on TikTok than there was on Instagram, but not seeing sales, then it just feels like, well, it's not proven itself yet.
Yeah, yeah.
And
In my opinion, or at least what happens with me, it's they are very the audience in TikTok. It's like very young, like very very
yeah,
young.
it started off very young, but it is getting more and more mature.
Yeah.
And depending on who you choose to follow, your For You page will have older audience in it if you're tending to follow more older
Uh-huh.
content creators. So it just depends. There is audiences there. It's just and in Instagram, I kind of feel like that's not the audience for my work either, and that's why I have posts on Etsy and have done SEO for that, and I'm driving traffic to Etsy because that is where there's a warm buyers in a sense. They're interested in purchasing a portrait. They're interested in a commission. They're interested, and so they're trying to make a choice between you and several other artists.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already in the mindset of making a purchase. Where on Instagram, they may see your work and think, oh, that would be kind of cool to get a portrait, and then ask you pricing. That's different than someone who is in Etsy, sees your price, starts asking you questions. They're already aware of the cost of what it is that you do, and just trying to understand if the photo that they have is going to work, or if you're the right artist for this particular need that they have.
Yeah.
And so that's, for me, I'm selling on Etsy, on Instagram, except for maybe the coaching now. It's not a hard sell. I just tell people that I'm doing it and giving them the content of my coaching.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I am treating my audience as as an audience that's interested in learning and providing content that helps them do that.
Great. That's great. So, okay. So AJ, we've been speaking for an hour or so. That's
Sure.
great. Amazing. I have just one last question for you. You
Okay.
can make it as long as you want or brief, whatever you want.
Okay.
And the question is, what would be your advice for young 30 years old AJ? Like, let's go back,
Yes.
meet yourself at the age of 30. What would you tell your young self?
So if anyone wants to take the time and go to my YouTube page, there's in the sort of the set video that plays when you open the page is
Uh-huh.
one that is exactly this question. It's
Oh,
advice. It's advice to the 28-year-old self as a 58-year-old, and it's very interesting. But I'll give the same answer here, which is that um, you have to be dedicated, committed to doing the work, and doing it as if your life depends on it, to make opportunities happen. You can't just occasionally do a painting and go, okay, well, I can paint. You do really have to roll up your sleeves. You have to treat it as something that's very important to you, and you have to work constantly at developing your skills. And even after you are making sales and you have clients, you have to continue to do it. It's not something that stops just because you get a certain level of success. And so what I didn't realize at the time when I was 30 is I got out of art school, and in art school I was very dedicated, but when I got out, I had portfolio pieces that I could show galleries, that I could show illustration clients, because I was doing illustration work. I wasn't even doing commissions back then, but I thought, okay, well, I have this portfolio. All I have to do is show it around. But I wasn't continually painting. I wasn't working on my craft. And over time, that really affected my ability to to grow as an artist. I would say that I kind of hit this certain level. And so when I got into my mid 50s, I was like, okay, that's sort of, I've sort of peaked as an artist. This is about as far as I can go. I can decide I can keep on working at this level, or I can quit. And I did say I'd stop painting for 7 years, kind of feeling like, yeah, I did about as good as I can do. And then I just started to put together the pieces. I wanted to paint. I needed to do it as much as I could, if not every day. And I needed to continue to work on my skills. In the area that I was passionate about, portrait painting, I wasn't very good at first. But I realized this is what I wanted to do, and it wasn't going to just happen. I had to work at it. So it was that dedication to continually working on my craft in a very dedicated kind of way, meaning spending 20, 30, 40 hours a week working on it, that over time you could see like, oh, well, this is where I was last year, and I could do the same, paint from the same reference and put them both together and say, okay, like here's the before and after. And I would do those. I would do every year I would do a painting of something that I had done the previous year or several years before, and just to see how my skills have increased. And so my advice to someone who's, you know, the 30-year-old me or someone similar is get to work.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going to happen by itself. You have to roll up your sleeves, and you have to do the hard stuff. I was looking at a photo recently of someone in the Florence Academy of Art.
Yeah.
You know how they do the cast drawings, and they, you know, you look at the drawing and you look at the cast, and you know, so at a quick glance you can't actually tell which one is the drawing, and which you know, it's a value. It's kind of like a value painting.
Yeah.
And which one is the cast, and these schools are turning out hundreds of these people every year. You know, there's one's in New York, there's the Grand Central Atelier, there's the Florence Academy, there's ones in California. These are very skilled artists that are coming out.
Yeah.
And you are competing against them in a way, you know. It's important to do the work. You're bringing your own flavor to the work, and that's important, because there's not a market for thousands of cast drawings.
Yeah.
Just because they can do them doesn't make them an artist per se. They have to bring something more to the work.
Absolutely.
And so, but at the same time, these people are working. They're working very hard at their craft, and you're in the market with them. You also, if you're serious, you have to also work on your craft.
Yeah.
You can't expect things to happen if you're just like, oh, well, I did a bunch of drawings, and what do you think?
Yeah. No.
And at some point I have to kind of shrug and say, like, you have to do the work. Like, take my portrait challenge, do so, you know. These are places where you can start, but it's not going to happen otherwise. I mean, yes, there are people that do very well and are very successful, and they lack certain drawing and painting skills, but they found a niche in a market and they do well doing that, and that's fine. But that's a few people that works for. There's very few people that get by and not grow, not develop their skills as an artist.
I'll take that advice to myself, for myself too.
Okay.
So AJ, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a big honor, and thank you for sharing, you know, who you are, a lot of tips for artists. It's amazing. I think it's a huge opportunity for all you're giving us. So Again, thank you so much and for being here.
Well, thank you for having me on this interview, and hope the audience out there enjoys it.
Of course. Thank you so much, AJ. See you later.
Okay, ciao.
Bye. Ciao.